Ashley Edwards, coastal Mississippi entrepreneur, former president and CEO, Gulf Coast Business Council, also a SuperTalk Mississippi News column contributor, joins us now. Appreciate it there, Ashley, for coming on today.
Hey, Gerard. Good to see you today, man.
What a great time it is for us political junkies, huh? No shortage of stuff to analyze, to consume.
I was telling my wife last night, for a political junkie, this is like being in the playoffs. So we're getting the best of it, of what we get to watch every 4 years.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen presidential candidates talk about eating dogs before. That was rather unusual, but that certainly happened last night. So first time these two have ever met in person. I wasn't aware of that, honestly, until a couple of weeks ago. That sort of surfaced as a news story. Did you know that?
I didn't know it till last night, actually. Did not realize they had never met. I mean, obviously, they've been in the same room a time or two in the Capitol during State of the Union speeches when Trump was president and so forth, but they've never interacted before. So I thought that was a really interesting thing to have two people who spend all of their time talking about each other who've never actually personally met each other.
That to some extent, does that not kind of define our politics these days? I mean, we sort of, in the various campaigns, we take the opponent and we build them into this almost non-human figure, if you will, that it just seems like we get the political candidates and campaigns do, just obsessed with attacking and denigrating and besmirching. Man, I sure would like to get back to just detailed policy issues and getting the candidates to articulate their positions on those. I don't feel like we got enough of that last night.
No, I think that's just about absent from our politics today. These are not policy-based campaigns by any stretch of the imagination. To your point, Gerard, I think it's interesting. So much of the pre-debate commentary and fodder now revolves around things like, will these two candidates shake hands with each other? 30 years ago, that's something that would have been a given. I mean, you would have never even wondered if the candidates would have greeted each other or shaken hands before or after. But we live in this era now where, this becomes the type of thing that we talk about. And I think it's indicative of just how divided we are as a society.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, right off the bat there, Vice President Harris was given a question about how do you account for, or what do you think about people being better off today than they were when you started, and she completely avoided answering that question and launched into this diatribe about being from the middle class and I'm going to give you this tax break and that tax break. That sort of set the tone for the night, did it not?
Absolutely. And, I think going into it, I sort of suspected that. I mean, I think that the metric for who would win that debate really came down to, where would the discussion be centered? If Trump was able to keep the discussion centered on the cost of goods, the economy under Trump 4 years ago, getting people to ask themselves, did I feel safer? Did I feel less risk? Was I more prosperous during the Trump years than I am today? Then that's where it would have been really good for him. Alternatively, where the Harris camp wanted Trump to be, was talking about things like January 6th, talking about his legal entanglements, talking about things like eating cats and ducks. Those are the types of things that Harris wanted the debate to be about. And, it was no surprise to me that she avoided that question and immediately wanted to try to redirect. Trump obviously took that bait very well, and much more of the debate was spent in a place that was better for the Harris camp than for the Trump camp, because there's no question about it. The economy is the single best issue for Trump. It's the issue for Trump, frankly, that people who don't like Trump, who don't care for Trump's personality, will concede, yes, I do feel like the economy was better under Trump, and he just wasn't able to keep it there at all.
That's a great point. That those who don't particularly care for Mr. Trump and his personality and his comportment still kind of hang their hat on supporting him because, from an economic perspective, their lives were better. That's a great point, Ashley, that you make there. I feel like he could have perhaps accentuated that a little better. It just seemed like both candidates spent maybe 3/4 of their time talking about the other candidate, denouncing the other candidate and criticizing the other candidate. Maybe 1/4 talking about their plans, their policies, and how they would improve American life.
Well, I go into these debates and I immediately want to see which candidate is put on defense. I think it's frankly indicative of the fact that there's not a lot of discipline in the Trump campaign. There's not a lot of discipline behind the scenes and the people that are prepping him, because he should have been keeping her on defense about the Biden economy every
Yeah.
chance that he got and pushing her back on her heels. She was going to go into the debate putting him on his heels about all of the fodder that's sort of the right thing on right wing influencer social media. Because at the end of the day, look, people that are fans of Trump, that are ardent supporters of him, are going to like what he has to say. The same is
Absolutely.
true with people who are ardent supporters of Kamala Harris. And as you know as well as anybody, what this comes down to is a few tens of thousands of swing voters who are not ideologue in 5 or 6 swing states. And the question of what are the issues that they want to hear about that's really going to move the needle on the margins. And Trump just wasn't disciplined enough to stay on those at all.
I think it's a winning formula for him. And I hope that the next couple of months, because I think the country would be considerably better served by another Trump presidency than a Harris presidency. But I hope in the next couple of months that his campaign focuses on exposing her radical views, but more importantly, promoting his plans and how they will make American life better, like extending the Trump tax cuts, for example. She didn't offer anything other than we're gonna raise taxes on the rich. And she once again said all the tax cuts and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went to Mr. Trump's rich billionaires, or however she termed it. That's been debunked a gazillion times, and you can go to the Department of Treasury's website and see that that's false information as well. He needs to highlight that.
Well, look, there's no question he does need to highlight that. The thing that concerns me, frankly, is at some point he's got to have people around him, and he has to personally be willing to hear that he didn't perform very well, so that he can actually make that adjustment. Because as long as they're out there saying, "Hey, I won 92-8 on the polls that we care about," as long as they're defending that, "Hey, I did great and everything was perfect," he's just not there. And I see a huge wasted opportunity there. Frankly, because if you're Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris's campaign, you want the microphone in front of Trump talking about Haitians eating dogs and cats as many hours of the day as he will spend doing that. And as long as he continues to choose to do that, he's not talking about the things that move the needle for him on the margins.
And the thing about it is they're vulnerable on the immigration issue. You can make those points. There are plenty of things to talk about with respect to the flow of immigrants, the massive flow of immigrants that's occurred under Biden. I mean, they've made it very clear we don't really want to shut the borders down. That's pretty obvious. There's plenty of content there and plenty of material that they could focus on that I think would be of interest to voters. And hopefully that's what the campaign does. But you're a business person. I'm a business person. Anytime you have some sort of event like this or even any sort of interaction with a customer, especially something of this magnitude, you're going to do a post-mortem, right? Find out where do we do well, where did we not? And it's not deemed a failure if you found some issues or some deficiencies. It just means, okay, let's address those so we can get better for the next time. That's just business 101 right there. And I hope that the Trump campaign does that. We got a break. If you can hang around, we keep talking about this. I'm enjoying it. You good? You
Yeah,
good?
I'm good.
Ashley? All right, great. All right, we got Ashley Edwards. We're coming right back, folks. We are visiting with Ashley Edwards talking about last night's debate. So hopefully, I guess to kind of wrap up that point, Ashley, that the Trump campaign will analyze the debate last night and figure out where improvements could be made. But more importantly, perhaps identify areas from what she said, probably even sound bites of stuff that she said last night, and incorporate that in their campaign promotions. I think that would be effective. And really just hammer those points over the next couple of months that we have leading up to the election. What do you think?
Well, look, I've always been a big fan of politics and, as you say, a political junkie. I love watching campaigns to determine who is disciplined and on message and really out there. It's like watching a good offense in football. Who can get out there and really execute the plays well? And I think that it's really to be seen if the Trump campaign can do that. I think I see that happening on the Harris side right now. They have a well-run, well-funded, disciplined campaign. And there's no question they've got some real weaknesses that they understand that they're going to have to overcome. And frankly, a month ago, the chances that Trump would lose this race in November were very, very small to none. And that's only increasing. And so it's yet to be seen, Gerard, if the Trump campaign can make the kind of adjustments they need to make, because there tends to be a sense of denial around where they have weaknesses. And I don't see that changing, frankly. And I think if you're a Republican or you're someone that wants to see Trump win in November, that ought to be of concern to you. It's kind of like the 12-step program. The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. They have to admit that they've got a problem here, that Trump is not on message and disciplined in a way that can be victorious in November.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think there's plenty for him to promote about his successes in his first term, but more importantly, his vision for a second term. And there's plenty that he can criticize and condemn about their performance. I feel like, talking about, of course, Biden and Harris, I feel like that perhaps the Democrats' machine is sensing that, this idea of framing Mr. Biden as a moderate, right, was successful in the last cycle, in the 2020 cycle. We're going to frame Kamala the same way, though, wink, wink, we really want to keep pushing for these more radically left policy positions. It just seems like that's what's going on here. Do you sense that as well?
Well, and I think they've got a running lane there. I mean, they can afford to do it. They don't have to worry about losing the left-wing base to Donald Trump or to a third-party candidate in this race.
True.
So she can continue to move towards the center. You look at what happened when Trump tried to do that a few weeks ago on the abortion issue, and he immediately had to snap back to a more pro-life position because he felt like some of his base was going to run away from him as a result of it. And so he's got less room for error in that regard. I mean, who would have ever thought you would have had Kamala Harris on a national debate saying, hey, Tim Walz and I are gun owners, and the last thing we're going to do is come take your gun. So absolutely they're going to frame her as a moderate because they can afford to do it, because the only thing that the left wing in the United States is more scared of than a moderate Democrat is Donald Trump. So they're going to win every time as long as Trump is the opposition. So they can afford to push her towards the center for the campaign. And Trump right now, given where he has, solidified himself with his base, just can't move to the center, because every time he does, the far right of the party, starts to threaten to pull out on him. And that's, there again, that's another reason, frankly, that Republicans have started to turn into losers in national electoral politics, because they're getting far too much into the realm of we've got to score perfectly on certain litmus tests, or otherwise our base is not going to support us. Yeah,
and you're trying to thread a needle there. Let's be honest, and it's difficult one to thread. It's extremely difficult. At the end of the day, as you know, it's 6 to 7% of the voters in about 5 states spread across 21 counties. I used to say it was 12 to 15. I heard who was it that said the other day they think it's 21 counties, but I don't know. That's up for debate. But nonetheless, it's a handful, and that's where the election is won or lost. I think to a great extent, people vote emotion. I've always believed that. They vote personality. They vote for who they like. You know, in business, you buy from who you like. You vote for who you like. It really starts with that. But, of course, you've got to back that up with some competence and proficiency as well and demonstrate that you're a capable leader. Of course, those are important. But you got to start with being likable. I don't know how the candidates fared in that category last night. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, I was interested to see what was happening with some of the swing state focus groups and some of the kind of instant polls that were coming out. And it certainly looked like there was some movement toward Harris after the debate. It seems like a lot of the focusers, they wanted to see if she could come out and seem unintimidated by Trump. If she would seem like a leader, if she would seem like someone that could hold her ground in the face of what was likely to be a real barrage from Trump, and she seemed to have passed that test in the minds of a lot of these voters. And it's just so striking to me the difference between the first debate and this debate, because the contrast between Trump and Biden on the stage was breathtaking.
Yeah.
Trump won that debate by just showing up. And, this time he didn't get any of those mulligans like he got the first time through, and came off as being angry and defensive, all things that they obviously had planned for and had tried to, set him up for. And they were very successful in doing that.
And her preppers, man, they had her ready with this "I'm not Joe Biden" quip. You knew that they had her ready for that one. It wasn't on her own. But, I mean, that's what you do. Your team prepares you, and they analyze, as you well know, the statements, the words, the terms, the tone, the delivery that resonates with voters. They felt like that was one, and she delivered it at a timely point during the debate. We'll see. I mean, it's hard to tell. I think, actually, it's fair to say all those who have made their mind up, their mind wasn't changed last night. It's the few people that you're trying to convince that haven't made their mind up. It's just really hard to tell. I saw a report this morning that said this is perhaps the closest race at this point in an election cycle in the history of this country for president.
Neck and neck, essentially tied as a race. You're exactly right. There are no Trump voters who are going to move to Harris. There are no Harris voters that are going to move to Trump. This entire presidential election is going to be won on the margins. It's going to be won in 5 or 6 swing states with a relative handful of voters in the grand scheme of things. And any campaign at this point that does not understand that in the stretch run of this race, they've got to be talking to those undecided voters, those very few swing voters that are left out there, is going to lose this race. Last night I think was a big indication of who's got that in center of their mind, and I did not see from the Trump camp that was the case. And that ought to be concerning for Republicans. I mean, there are people out there that believe very deeply in Donald Trump, and what I saw last night was very concerning in that regard. I mean, look, Van Jones was crying on CNN after the Biden and Trump debate.
Sure was.
Because they just knew that there was no way that Biden could win that race with what they had just seen on that stage. The fact that we don't see that kind of reaction coming from inside the Trump campaign with what they saw last night should be a source of concern. It wasn't on the same level as the disaster that Biden's performance was, but in my opinion, it wasn't far from that level of disaster. And I think that there's got to be some pragmatism about that and some real adjustment that happens going forward.
In the closing statements, there was a contrast, I thought, in that Kamala Harris, she did articulate her vision, focused on that. I disagree with all her policies, honestly, and I believe all that vision is just pie in the sky stuff. But she focused on that. He, on the other hand, he kind of centered his closing statements around the failures of the Biden-Harris administration. We got to go, but quickly, what did you think? We got a couple of seconds here. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, the economy's big for him. Immigration is big for him. Crime is big for him. He needs to stick to those three things. I mean, those are the things that will ultimately win him the White House if he can be disciplined in his messaging.
If he'll focus on that and how he will address those issues and fix them, I think that's a winning formula, more so than talking about how bad they are. Let them do that. I think it's a losing formula for them. Appreciate it, Ashley. Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Good seeing you.